Welcome to a very special episode of Cosmic Road today, where we are joined by well-known author, researcher, and filmmaker, L.A. Marzulli. Welcome to the show, L.A.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
I love it. And you were just explaining to me how many movies that you have been involved in and made.
We have 30 films in our stable. We have an hour together. So, I mean, it's like, lots of material there. I produced or co-produced all 30 of them. I hosted all 30 of them. I directed 20 of them. So, or co-directed with my new business partner, Gil Zimmerman. Richard Shaw and I did. In fact, today is his fifth anniversary of his passing. So it's kind of intense day for us around here. But Rick and I did 11 films in the Watcher series together, and Rick directed them and I hosted them, and we had a great romp together. So there's 30 films. There's 14 books. Number 14 will be out in the fall. It's on the ladder of disclosure, UFO disclosure. In other words, rung one is 2017 with Commander David Fravor, talking about the tic-tac shaped object that we've come to know so well. So that'll be out in the fall, and there's basically 17 rungs. It's about a 70,000 word book, lots and lots of detail, lots of links. There'll be QR codes in it, and that'll be available in the fall.
Awesome. And what's the title of that?
We're calling it, the working title right now is The Rungs of Disclosure, but we're not sure whether we're going to go with that or not. I actually signed a deal with a very well-known publisher. And it's the first deal I've signed with someone in probably 20 years, close to 20 years, because we have our own publishing company. So, right. But these guys have a really big footprint, and I signed the contract yesterday. We're excited about it. They're excited about it. This book is probably the most important book I've ever written. It's very timely, and it gives the whole, it gives a look at the UFO phenomena through a Christian biblical lens, which you don't hear about. All you hear about, these are our space brothers from Zeta Reticuli or, Epsilon Eridani or wherever, but you never hear that, wait a minute, well, that's not true, never. There are some people, as of late, who are beginning to look at the interdimensional or extra dimensional aspect of it, which of course is the paradigm that I've been banging that drum for like 30 years or longer. These are not our space brothers from some faraway galaxy. They are, in fact, interdimensional entities with a very, very nefarious agenda.
So, okay, so you see it as a nefarious agenda. Are there positive ETs or beings, or is all of it negative?
Well, I mean, that's a really interesting question. We need to define our terms. In other words, if a person has a good encounter with an angelic being that saves his or her life, here's an example. They're going through a green light, and a tractor trailer truck loses its brakes. It's about to T-bone them completely. Everybody's going to die. All of a sudden, they see their car is moved 100 yards down the road. How did that happen? That's a good guy. That's a good interdimensional angelic being. However, when you really start to dissect the entire UFO phenomena, we have 10 films on it. Number 4 and number 6. Number 4 is on abductions. There's nothing positive about abductions. You are kidnapped and you are raped. If you're a man, they take your sperm. If you're a woman, they take your ovum or they impregnate you. At the 3rd month, they come back and take you and remove the baby or the Nephilim hybrid from your womb. So in my opinion, first of all, they're not extraterrestrial. They are interdimensional. And because my view of the universe is we live in a holographic universe. What we see out there, people always go, and this is a straw man argument, there's billions of galaxies and millions of planets and blah, blah. That's a straw man argument. No one knows what's out there. No one even knows where we are in this thing. In other words, if the universe is analogous to the United States of America, is planet Earth in Walla Walla, Michigan, Dallas, Texas, New York? Nobody knows. We don't know where we are, how this thing is, how far it goes. And just because there's a bunch of stuff, it's like this. Just, if you and I went down to the beach and there's trillions of grains of sand, right? That's what we're looking at. Well, that doesn't mean there's life on any of those grains of sand. And what I find interesting is the evolutionists will say that all this happened, life on planet Earth happened over billions of years of evolution, which again is is a theory. It's not provable. No one knows. Whereas the biblical worldview states that the Creator spoke everything into existence. We know that everything in existence has a vibration of sound to it. Everything, every molecule vibrates, has a frequency, has a sound to it. So the Creator spoke everything into existence. So what's interesting about that, there's tons and tons of prophecies which hail back to that. Whereas the evolutionist really doesn't have too much to hang their hat on. It's a theory. And of course, when we look at the complexity of the deoxyribonucleic acid, the double helix of life, the spiral of life, the DNA molecular structure, even the most ardent evolutionist goes, this just didn't fall out of some tree someplace. It's a very, very complex chain of events, no pun intended. And so the neo-Darwinists are looking to the so-called space brothers as our creators. And that's what they're holding to, that we were seeded here, that's panspermia, by some advanced race of extraterrestrials. That's one paradigm. The other paradigm is a loving holy God spoke us into existence.
Well, on my channel, I talk frequently about frequency and vibration, and that definitely does seem to play a part in even the fabric of reality. So, definitely part of that, pardon the pun, resonates with me. But okay, all right. So, you are really well known for changing track a little bit. You're really well known for being a researcher of giants in the Nephilim. And, you see, this through more of a spiritual or religious lens. Am I right in terms of the giants?
Well, you just use those terms, spiritual and religious. So what does that mean? So if you want to talk, I'm a frank supernaturalist. I believe in the supernatural. I believe the supernatural is more real than the natural world around us. I believe the supernatural has been involved in mankind literally for thousands and thousands of years. We have been visited by supernatural entities, and they have set up shop in numerous places all over the planet. What people don't get, and the gateway to understanding is this. This is the whole deal. And it's not taught in some of the religious churches. It's not. You won't hear it. And when you go to the book, the first book in the biblical narrative, which is the book of Genesis, the beginning, in chapter 3, and remember, in the early days of the Torah, the first 5 books, there were no chapters, okay? The only reason why they're there is to give us an address. So if I say to you, hey, Jack, turn to chapter 4 of Moby Dick, and when Queequeg says to Moby, whatever, Captain Ahab, you would go to chapter 4, you would look it up. Oh, there's Queequeg talking to Captain Ahab. That's all we're talking about. So it has no religious content. It's not something, religious. It's just an address. Genesis 3:15 states this. And you've got the pre-incarnate Christ. That's from the Shroud of Turin. How does that work? You got the pre-incarnate Christ in the garden with Adam and Eve and the dragon, the fallen cherub. Adam and Eve are terrified because they realize that something has happened to them and they're not sure exactly what it is. And they're really bothered by it. And so what happens is, I'm quitting mailers so we don't get annoying pings here for the rest of the show. Give me 1 second. Window, enter full screen. Thank you. So the pre-incarnate Christ says this to the dragon. And when I say this is the key to everything. He says, your seed, your offspring, talking to the dragon, the fallen cherub, your seed, your offspring will be at war with the offspring of the woman. The one coming from the woman, the Messiah, will crush your head, you will bruise his heel. That's the whole deal. That's where we are now. That's what's been going on for thousands of years, and it continues until it's all played out. That's the key to everything right there.
Okay, you say all played out. Do you see that happening in the near future?
I think we're close. I'm not a date setter, but there are ancient biblical prophetic texts which talk about precisely what we see forming in the Middle East. Are we there yet? No, we're not there yet, but we could be very soon. all eyes, there's a prophecy, ancient prophecy, it's Ezekiel 38 and 39. And in that, there's a list of nations which are right there. Russia, Iran, and Turkey are the three players, the three major players in that coalition, which goes up against a land of unwalled villages. So when that was written thousands of years ago, there was no such thing as a land of unwalled villages. That's number one. People didn't live that way. If you wanted to survive, you built the biggest wall around your city. It's the Lord of the Rings. But the airplane changes all that. So when Israel goes back into its ancient land, which is another prophecy, Amos 9. Amos is just a guy that lived thousands of years ago and had a prophecy. I will gather the captives. I will gather my captives, Israel, and reestablish them in their ancient homeland. Basically, that's what it says. Never again to be pulled out. I will plant them in their homeland. They will build the way cities. They will plant vineyards and drink the wine. They will plant gardens and eat the fruit. They will dwell safely there and never again be pulled up out of a land. I'm sort of hopping around there, but that's basically what it says. That happens in 1948. Israel is a land of unwalled villages. That's unheard of in the ancient world. So we have Israel in a false peace, which is exactly what they've been in, till October 7th, all hell breaks loose, and here we are. What's interesting to me as a biblical supernaturalist, what I see forming is the possible fulfillment of Ezekiel 38, where those nations come up against a land of unwalled villages. I've been to Israel. It is a land of unwalled villages. There's no doubt about that. So the player to watch right now is Turkey. There's a picture I have of Erdogan, the president of Turkey, Raisi, the president of Iran, and Putin, the president of Russia, all on the same stage together. What's bizarre about this, thank you, Mr. Balloons, what's bizarre about this is that Raisi is a Shia Muslim, the Shia branch of Islam, and Erdogan is Sunni. Sunni Muslims are the majority. They have been at war with each other literally for 1,300 years. So the fact that they are on the same stage together speaks volumes to me. Russia is already in Syria. They're already embedded. They're already in cahoots with Iran. There's no doubt about it. The player I'm watching right now is Turkey. I've been saying this for months. The player to watch is Turkey. Because if Turkey gets involved in this thing, everything changes very rapidly. Because Turkey's got a standing air force, standing army. They're not. It's not the Iranians. I mean, the Iranians are, with all due respect. I mean, when Israel flew that sortie about a month ago now, caught them completely by surprise. The entire world looked up, and the entire military complex throughout the globe looked at that raid and went, "Oh my gosh!" They had no idea, because the Israelis were flying the United States F-34 fighter jets. They came in, dropped their ordnance, and left before the Soviet-made S-400 anti-missile system even knew they were there. That's a game changer, huge game changer. There's another ancient prophecy which says Damascus will be destroyed. Damascus has become a ruinous heap overnight, in a moment. The Israelis have threatened the Iranians, if you do A, B, and C, we will destroy Damascus. The point I'm trying to make is all this was written thousands of years ago, but you got to know where to look. And you've got to be a student of prophecy to understand that we are in a window where all this stuff could manifest. I'm not saying it will, but we're at 257 days since October 7th. We were supposed to be in Israel when October 7th happened. I was supposed to be in the north of Israel at Gilgal Raphaim 3 days before the tour. So I would have been there. And I was at the Prophecy Watchers Conference because we realized there was an overlap, so we pushed things back. So I was where was I? I was in I was in Oklahoma when it happened, which was just a mind boggler. I mean, it was a Nephilim tour. So everything goes back to the seed war. Here's what's important, and here's what's germane to the conversation. The seed of the dragon will be at enmity, at war with the seed of the woman. Well, 3 chapters later, we get the Nephilim. What are the Nephilim? The progeny, the offspring, fallen angels and earthly human women, creating a hybrid being known as the Nephilim. My work, I have dedicated my life to this. I have been to numerous sites all over the globe.
I call Sacsayhuaman in Peru Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. I've crawled down a metumulus of Gilgai Raphaim and filmed in there with our good friend and archaeologist Mondo Gonzalez. I've been all over the United States looking at the ancient megalithic sites here of Earth. I've been all through Europe looking at megalithic sites, the dolmens, the ancient tombs, all this stuff. I call it fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. Let me give you one example. That many of these sites are built on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. For instance, Stonehenge, England, 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. Stonehenge in New Hampshire, America, 18-and-a-half-year cycle. The Great Circle Mountain, the Octagon Mountain in Ohio, 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. Teotihuacan, Mexico, 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. They are obsessed with it. So here's the problem. You go back a couple of thousand years ago. So let's say this, I have fun with this. So Jack, you and I hop in the transporter and we go back in time 3,000 years, okay? And we land, I don't know, pick a place. We land in Ohio, okay? And we're there and we look up and we see the moon and we go, wow, this is really fascinating. The moon just came up here and it's gonna set over here. Wow, that's really cool. Next night we get up and we notice the moon has come up in a different place. And it's set in a different place. So we go, wow, well, let's track this. So we put a stone down on the top of a big hill as our observation deck. The moon comes up, we put a stake in the ground. The moon sets, we put another stake in the ground. We keep doing this, but we don't know it's an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. That's the first part. And we don't know what year we have decided to jump in and start tracking the moon. And then let's say we get a 5-day rainstorm and we can't see the moon. Now what happens? Do we guess? And then how do we crunch the data where all these goofy sticks are to figure out that, wait a minute, we've been here before? And this is the complexity. There's a book by an English author by the name of Tom. He talks about, he actually uses this, what I just said, as a method for somehow dating the lunar cycle. Well, the Book of Enoch, which is a pseudepigraphical book, it's ancient. It's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and all sorts of other places. It talks about a fallen angel giving this to mankind, giving the 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle to mankind thousands of years ago, pre-flood, by the way, pre-flood. And then you go to places like Sacsayhuaman. Let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about here, because the picture is worth, a gazillion words. I mean, it just is. See if I can find it. If I can't find it quickly, I will move on. Yeah, here we go. It should be right in here. Hello. Yeah. So this is Sacsayhuaman. And this is in Peru. Look at the top. Look at the little figure.
Yeah.
Look at
amazing architecture. Yeah.
So the question is, first of all, this is andesite stone. And you cannot cut andesite stone with a copper chisel, which is all the Inca have. We've demonstrated this. We have a block of andesite stone, a brand new copper chisel, tink, 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 tink. Copper chisel is completely dull after 7 hits. Andesite stone doesn't show anything. So if the Inca didn't do it, and they said they didn't do it when the Spanish conquistadors came in, who did it? Now, there's only 2 paradigms. The ancient alien crowd will tell us that, extraterrestrials, they've been doing this for, 15 years on ancient aliens, and I was on the first 2 seasons of it. That's why we recreated Watchers, our own film series, which obviously doesn't have the footprint that Ancient Aliens does, but we're telling another side of a story. Yeah, you could call them, first of all, anything that doesn't originate on planet Earth is by definition an extraterrestrial. So an angel, whether good or bad, coming and visiting Earth would be in fact an extraterrestrial because they didn't originate here. So define our terms. That doesn't mean they're from Epsilon Eridani. That just means that they're extra-dimensional, interdimensional, but they don't originate on Earth. So in essence, I could call an angel, whether good or bad, an angel just means messenger, by the way. I could say, well, they are extraterrestrials. Now, I say that tongue in cheek because to me, they're interdimensional entities, which are, because they can manipulate space, time, matter, and energy in ways that defy our physics. I mean, they do it all the time when they show up, both the good guys and the bad guys. If you're abducted, you go through the window. How's that possible? First of all, you're levitated off the bed. How is that possible? The window was closed.
and then you go through the window. That's impossible in our physics. Karen, we published her book, Karen Wilkinson, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She's a lifelong abductee. She got out of it. She got free of it. She had children by them, 3 of them. They come and they take the baby at the end of the 3rd trimester. So she's kidnapped and raped, essentially. And then they take the baby. And I've talked to other men and women who have been abducted. Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She makes a great interview. We published her book. So if you're interested.
Before you move on, I have to ask, how did she get out of it?
You really want to know?
Yeah.
She gave her life to Jesus. See, when I say that to most people, immediately the hackles go up and they think of cathedrals and monks with funny haircuts and candles and stained glass windows and processions and dark confessionals and the Crusaders and the religious wars and all this stuff. It's like, ah, and I get it. I can't stand it either, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who did this, the Shroud of Turin, and they've never been able to figure out how. We think we have an idea. It was plasma energy that did it. This is what the shroud looks like.
Yeah, very intriguing. Yeah.
Yeah. The
Now,
shroud,
I've seen compelling evidence that the shroud
Yeah.
is legit.
this is what it looks like to the naked eye. But when you photograph it, like Secunda Pia did way back when, he dropped the glass plates. He couldn't believe it. You see the scourging, you see the nail prints in the wrists, not the palms, which is, you see the helmet of thorns. I mean, this to me, I call it God's calling card. So what we're talking about is there's an ancient prophecy or scripture. In the beginning was the Word was with God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made by him, and without him was not made anything that was made. So who is the Word? Well, the Word is Jesus. Who is Jesus? Jesus is the Messiah. He comes from the seed, the offspring of the woman. I'll say it again. Your seed, your offspring, pointing of a dragon, will be at enmity, at war with the offspring of the woman. The Messiah, the proto-evangelium, technical religious term, but the Messiah will come from the woman who will crush your head, you will bruise his heel. How did that happen? Happens 2,000 years on Calvary, because you can't kill God, Jack. You can't kill God. And the dragon figured, well, we know he's not going to die. So, he's just going to come down off the cross. This is what they're all waiting for. He doesn't do that. You can't kill God, or can you? And that's why he becomes the firstborn of the dead, which is what ancient prophetic literature tells us. He becomes the firstborn of the dead. And guess where he goes? I just love this because it's written right there. He goes to Tartarus. Who's in Tartarus? This is some ancient, gloomy, ethereal dungeon someplace. But he goes there to Tartarus and he proclaims to the fallen angels, the one way back in Genesis 6, who created the Nephilim and are now imprisoned. No jailbreak. I just won. It's checkmate. It's over. I mean, this is all deep end of the pool stuff. And you'll never hear about it in church. Most churches never talk about it at all. But I am flown into churches. So Friday night's a primer, which takes 2 to 3 hours. All day Saturday morning, there's usually 2 presentations. Same thing in the afternoon. There's an advanced Q&A. Then Sunday morning. And then people walk out of there with their heads spinning.
Okay. So she gave her life to Jesus. And did she call out to Jesus during the abduction? Is that what ended it?
It just stopped. But I have talked to numerous other people who have been in the process of being abducted, and they have called out to the Lord, to Jesus, and it has stopped the abductions. And I realize, to someone who doesn't know this stuff, it sounds like a fairy tale. I totally get that.
No. I mean, I'm well researched into abductions, and I've heard of that happening, and it does. It works. Sometimes there are some times where it doesn't, but there are numerous instances where, just calling out to God, and Jesus seems to have done the trick. Now, you say that it's all negative, the abductions, and I totally understand that point of view. But there are people, contactees, abductees, who believe they have signed a pre-birth agreement with the beings for these abductions to, I guess, assist them in whatever they're doing, with these hybrids, whatever. Have you heard that idea, and what do you think of it?
I think, first of all, that there's something called the Stockholm syndrome, And the Stockholm syndrome is when a person begins to side with his captors. So, the bottom line, and I mean, I've talked to lots of different abductees, people on both sides of the aisle, people who've gotten free and people who have Stockholm syndrome to the nines and now have sided with them and believe that they have some special mission. I'll just give you one example, and I won't say her name. There was a woman that heard me on Coast to Coast. She was a lifelong abductee. She would get voice to skull messages, come out now, we're here. And she would go out, the graves would be standing in the backyard. I saw the photographs. The graves would be in the backyard, chips would be overhead. They had a special, and I've heard this, I can't tell you how many times, a special task for her. She was chosen, she was special. She was down to 90 pounds when she contacted me. She was basically in the process, they were killing her slowly, because that's what they'll do eventually. Not all of them, but eventually the end is always destruction on some level. And so she heard me on Coast to Coast, and she emailed me, and we got on the phone and we talked. And she gave her life to Jesus hesitantly, not through me, but she just did it. And they stopped. Just like that, they stopped. And it was definitely, I actually interviewed her numerous times afterwards, and she had a show and was on her show. In our fourth film on the UFO series, it's on abductions. Al Matthews, Karen Wilkinson, Emil Jurek, and Angela Beckman. All of them have been taken. All of them have been taken. Sperm, they've all been violated. Babies taken. I mean, the whole deal. And it's visceral, because when you talk to someone like Karen or Angela, the babies were taken. Angela awakens at night. She looks out the window. There's the ship. What are you doing here? And voice to skull communication. We're here for you. Next thing you know, she's floating out the door. How many times have we heard this? And they take the baby from her. And that's what, every abductee I've ever heard, that's what's going on. And I actually interviewed Karen today on my show. And what was interesting, the whole abduction, and correct me, like you, I've been studying this for decades, since I was like 12 years old and I saw my first UFO. So it seems like the whole UFO flap happens around 47. Now, people have seen the star gods and all that with Native Americans. Okay, I get all that. But the whole, and I'm kind of painting with a broad brush, but modern ufology in some ways starts, right around 47. Roswell crash.
Yeah, sure.
All that stuff. And the breeding program, in my opinion, also starts because the offspring look in the early days look very sickly. They look more alien than they do human. Big black eyes, long stringy blonde hair. They look emaciated and sick. And then it shifts. Then the breeding program gets a little better. The black-eyed kids come into vogue. Black eyes, short, stocky. They look like kids, but they're not kids. We interviewed David Weatherly on this, and David and I both agree that these are not children. They may look like children, but they're not children. They're far older.
So you think the black-eyed children phenomenon are because of the hybridization program?
Absolutely, all day long.
Very interesting. Okay.
All day, because it's a cohesiveness, and then you can throw Bigfoot in there too. But I digress.
You think he's created in the same way?
I'm still doing more research on it, but they are, in my opinion, they were at one time the guardians of the forest. At one time, they have been, not all of them, but most of them have been messed with, specifically genetically. They have reproduced in numbers since the Gimli-Patterson tape by the thousands. We all know that. It's not like Gimli-Patterson anymore, where here's a footprint. Now there's sightings like every week, for crying out loud. And are these, again, biblical prophetic narrative, the therion, the Greek word is therion, the beasts of the earth. Well, my late battle buddy Russ Disgar and I would talk about the beasts of the earth not being hamsters and giraffes, sort of tongue in cheek here. That's not what we're talking about. So what else is there? The beasts of the earth. These are interdimensional entities. They can pop in, they can pop out. They're huge, 12, 14 feet tall. They can lift cars. They can do all sorts of crazy stuff. You have one of these things loose in your town, and all havoc breaks loose, all hell breaks loose. So is it, I've gone publicly and stated that I believe that Sasquatch are the therion, the beasts of the earth. So getting back to the hybridization, all this kind of kicks off. And then you get to Al Matthews in the 2000s, which is where we are now. And he has an encounter, and he gave us the story. We broke the story with Al. Al was just like Karen. Al was abducted and taken from a very early age, from like 6 or 7 years old. And, marks on the body, all the stuff, all the classic telltale marks of an abductee. And when he came across the line, he was at his wit's end. So he fled Toronto because it was a lifelong of being abducted out to Vancouver Island. Well, they followed him there because you can't leave them. You can't escape. And so he tells the story, and he's a professional mover. So he's contracted by this woman, we'll call her Diane, and he meets with her, pretty gal, looks nothing weird, but she's got these really dark, like swimmer's goggles, glasses almost around her eyes. Al figures, well, maybe she's got light sensitive, not going to embarrass, not going to say anything. So this is where it gets into high strangeness, to quote G. Allen Hynek. They're on the freight elevator going up to see her stuff. And she leans over. Never met this woman before. Leans over and goes, "They're listening, Al." Saw in the film, by the way. And Al goes, "Who's listening?" And she goes, "Al, the Greys. You and I were supposed to meet on the ships." Al's completely creeped out by this, and who wouldn't be?
Yeah, that just comes out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. And you'll see why in just a minute. So Al, in the interview, he goes, "I gave her my phone number," and I go, "Mistake number one," because that's the big mistake. And she's constantly calling him up and basically propositioning him. She wants to have sex with him. So one night after work, she says, "Hey, I'm here with my friend. I know you're close by. Why don't you come by and have a drink?" So Al goes over. She's with a friend. They're drinking these huge, drinking wine out of these really big goblets. So Al comes in. Diane's still wearing the very dark glasses over her eyes. The friend's normal. Beautiful summer night. And all of a sudden, on the side of her glass, this big deer fly lands. And Al goes, "Let me get a tissue and I'll get rid of this thing for you." She goes, "No, I'll get it." And she reaches out with her index finger, and the fly, she doesn't grab the fly. The fly clings to her index finger like this. So here's the fly. She goes like this, and the fly clings to her index finger. She brings it up to her face. When her finger's about 6 inches away, she goes like that and sucks it in.
What?
Yep.
That's not normal.
No, it's not normal at all. It gets better. This is all on film. Al tells his testimony. So she takes off the glasses for the first time. She goes over to Al, and he's sitting like this, and she mounts him. So now they're face to face. She lifts up his shirt and starts rubbing his chest and says, "My, you're well preserved." Now, at this point, I challenge him. And I say, "Al, you have a girlfriend. Is this normal behavior?" And he goes, because no one's ever challenged him like this before. I call this UFO brain fog, because when a normal human being like you and me are around these entities, we're not thinking right. We have trouble forming thoughts, even remembering our own name. And
I have trouble anyway. I can't imagine what it would be like with an entity.
And I don't ever want to see one. But she leans over to kiss him, and he pushes her away, and she goes to the ground, and the eyes shapeshift, and they become reptilian with yellow flecks in the eyes. And she lets out, according to Al, the most evil laugh you've ever heard in your life. She's a hybrid being is what she is. She's a modern day Nephilim. She can pass. I'll give you one more story, just one more. So this guy, I interviewed him on my show. This guy's a contractor, and he and his buddy hop in his pickup truck, and they go to a fast food restaurant. They get something to eat for lunch. We all know the drill. You go to window one, you make your order, you pay for your order. Now you're at the pickup window. They're waiting. Look over. There's the woman. She hands him his buddy's lunch, and he hands it over to his buddy. He reaches back like this. She hands the bag. They look at each other. Her face shifts. Half of it's incandescent alien with a big black eye. Other half is human. They stare at each other for perhaps 2 or 3 seconds, maybe not even that. She realizes she's been outed. She covers her face and runs away from the window. Her coworker goes like this as she goes running by. What do you do with that? I mean, I have stories like this. We could talk all night with this kind of nonsense, but they're here. They're walking amongst us. And I believe the abductions really kicked off around 47, 48, early 50s. That's when it really explodes. And now we have, as as Dr. David Jacobs would say, they're walking amongst us. Classic book to read.
A great and terrifying book.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I think. And this is all, let me just give you one more ancient prophecy. So there's this guy by the name of Daniel. He's living about 2,500 years ago in what is now Persia. And a benign, a friendly entity appears to him and begins to talk and tells him all this stuff which is going to happen and prophecy and all this cool stuff, right? And the entity, the good angel, says to Daniel in verse 243 that their seed, there's that word seed again. This is why Genesis 3:15, that's the gateway. If we don't get that, we don't get anything else. Genesis 3:15 is the gateway to everything that's going on right now in modernity. So the angel says to Daniel, your seed, their seed, not your, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. I'll say it again. Their seed, whose seed? Well, it's not the seed of men. So who is it? Genesis 3:15. And then the angel gives us what I call a supernatural clue. He tells us when this is going to happen. He says, men and women will run to and fro over the face of the earth, and knowledge will increase. As we are speaking, planes circumnavigate the globe. They fly everywhere, thousands of planes. We're here. Knowledge increases exponentially every 6 months. We're here. We're in the time of the end, and the prophecy is there. Men and women running to and fro over the face of the earth, knowledge increases. So whose seed is mingling? There's your abductions right there. It spells it out. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men. And the word cleave means marriage. I got this from Jim Williamson. He's a researcher. It says in the days of Genesis, a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. That's a marriage contract. There's no marriage contract with the abductees. You know that. I know that. They just take what they want. They take what they want.
Yeah, they do take what they want. I like the idea of them seducing people more than abducting people. I think that's, I don't want to be flip about it, but that is definitely better than the other way. But okay, so what do you think the goal is with the hybridization program?
She's a hybrid. She's a modern day Nephilim. She's soulless. She's in a fixed state. She's soulless. She has no soul.
Well, with the hybridization program in general, what are the beings that are creating these hybrids doing? What is the purpose of it all?
So the dragon's outnumbered 2 to 1. He's creating an army.
Okay, that's what's going on. Is that the dragon? And am I correct in thinking that is Lucifer, Satan? The antagonist. Correct. Yeah. Okay. So the dragon is creating an army against I guess the army of light. Am I? Yes. Okay. You were talking about Israel earlier and, all this apocalyptic stuff. What do you make of the red heifers?
Very interesting. A friend of mine, Mondo Gonzalez, there it is.
The red heifer ritual. There it is. The last piece of what was it? The last piece of the 3rd temple puzzle. Okay.
And the temple will be rebuilt. There's no doubt about it. It's going to happen. The red heifers, the ashes from a red heifer are needed. They have the red heifers, and they could do, it just never ends. They could do the ritual, but they know if they do that, probably all hell's going to break loose. In fact, there were rumors that the reason why Hamas attacked was because they got wind of the red heifer ritual. They know about it. So, it will happen at some point. I don't know when, but it will happen, and they will. See, I've been to the Temple Mount.
And what most people don't understand, but Temple Mount is over 40 acres of property. And there's a section by the East Gate that it's not used. It's used for overflow for the Muslims at the Dome of the Rock. But the Dome of the Rock's not there. There's plenty of place, plenty of room for that third temple. And we know that the guy who cuts the deal, this is prophecy. I'm not making this stuff up. It's and it will come to pass that the guy that cuts the deal with Israel to rebuild the temple is in fact the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist, the one instead of Christ, who the whole world will follow. He will cut that deal. See, this is what's weird about prophecy. If you let Jack, okay, so you and I hop in the time machine again, and we go back 120 years, right? And so it's like right around the 1900s, and I go, Jack, guess what? Israel's going to become a nation again. And you go, LA, that's absurd. That's never going to happen. The Ottoman Turks own all this property. It's never going to happen. I go, yeah, but that's what prophecy tells us. So you go, well, that's your opinion. I'm glad you think that. Call me if something happens, right? So 1917 happens. The Balfour Declaration occurs, giving Jews a homeland in their ancient homeland. And at the same time, the Turks lose the war. So the Ottoman Empire is dismantled by the Brits and the French. What most people don't get, because they don't know their history, is that the Ottoman Empire used to encompass the modern nations of Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. And Egypt was part of the Ottoman Empire. They got their independence and created their own, as of all of North Africa, it was all part of the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire was carved up in the modern states of Iraq and Syria and Jordan and Lebanon and Israel were carved out. And most people don't even know that. That's how we got to where we are now. So the fact that Israel in 1948 declares its nationhood, that's prophecy. Amos 9 tells us, I will take my captives. Oh, why can't I think of this now? I will bring my captives, Israel, basically back into their homeland. We already talked about this. They will build the waste cities. They will plant vineyards and drink the wine. They will plant gardens and eat the fruit. They will dwell there, never to be pulled up again out of that land. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's basically it. So we are in, and that, in my opinion, starts the prophetic clock ticking. It starts to. Let me just wrap this up in some ways by saying this. So you and I are talking, and this should keep everybody up at night, but it doesn't, because we're so used to this, time-space continuum that we find ourselves in, right? Where are you right now, Jack? Where are you?
I'm in College Station, Texas.
Okay, but where are you? Where's Jack? Where are you hiding in this little three-dimensional biological bodysuit? Where are you?
I don't. Where? Tell me.
Nobody knows. Not one person on this planet who has ever lived or will live know how your spirit interfaces with this little shell that we find ourselves in. So while we're talking, all of our senses are working. You're hearing, which in itself is, how does that work? You're not going, what is he going to say next? It sounds like Swahili to me. No, I can talk as fast as I want to talk here, and you can understand everything I'm saying because your brain can process it just as fast as I'm speaking. And that that's true. You can. You're not straining. You're just, and your eyes are blinking, moisture's going on, your lungs are going in and out. You're not, I better take this next breath. You're not thinking your heart's doing this. The banana split you ate and you shouldn't have eaten for lunch is digesting your stomach, right? So you're like, how does all this work? And where do you reside? And no one knows. Nobody knows where you can cut the brain open. There's no little guy going, hi. It's not there. So no one knows how consciousness interfaces with this little biological bodysuit that we're in. And that should keep everybody up at night, but it doesn't, because we're so, used to this thing. We think it's normal. It's not normal. We are spirit, men and women. We are spirit. The body is the body. The soul is what we inherit from our DNA, our inclinations, our gifting. That's the soul. But the spirit's something else. When we die, our body stays here. Soul and spirit go up.
Very interesting. Yeah, and I've heard that before in my spiritual research, the idea that the soul and the spirit are different from each other. And I've even heard there may be even 3 layers to it. It's interesting. But okay, I know your time is limited. I know you have about 15 minutes left, right? Okay, well, I couldn't let you get away without talking about giants. All right, so I was listening to Timothy Alberino the other day, and he was talking about giants, and he was talking about the Kandahar giant.
We
And
broke the story.
he said that you had a story about the Kandahar giant,
We
but
broke the story.
but it had a different date. It had a different date than his date. So he was wondering if there might be two such incidences. A
You're
different.
confusing Steve Quayle because there's two different giants. Steve and I worked on this. We got our guy together with Steve Quayle's guy, and they talked, and we realized two different places, two different time periods. There's two. But I also interviewed the grandson of the witch who lived in Kandahar, who used to bring offerings to the cave so the giant wouldn't raid the village. I'm not making this stuff up.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. That's crazy. No,
So
no,
we broke
I'm
the
just
story.
quoting Timothy
Yeah,
Alberino.
yeah. We broke
And
the story on the
but
Kandahar,
but you are saying there were like two incidences,
at least two.
at least two. Okay, tell us about that.
Well, the Kandahar giant, this is circa the Afghan war. So our military has dropped off in a helicopter in the Kandahar province. They're looking for high value targets in caves. They missed their rally point. They missed their second rally point. At this point, the next morning, another chopper is set down with another patrol to follow these guys and see what happened. So according to our witness, they're coming down this trail and they start to see broken pieces of what looks like radio parts, uniforms, flesh. I mean, it's weird. Blood, something's going on here. Wild animal, they don't know what's going on. So they're high up, the valleys below, they're on this like large cliff area, and above them is a cave in the Kandahar province. Out of the cave comes a 12 to 14 foot red-haired, six-fingered, double rows of teeth, Nephilim giant, brandishing a very large spear. And it comes out screaming at them. They all freeze because it's a nightmare come to life. This is the eyewitness testimony of the shooter. One of the guys begins to run at the giant, shooting at him. Well, the giant takes off with the spear, and everyone is stunned by the agility and speed which the giant moves. Before anybody can do anything, the giant has skewered this guy and hoisted him up on a spear and is yelling and screaming. Somebody goes, shoot him in the head, shoot him in the head. They basically decapitate him with their weapons. Giant falls to the ground. A big Chinook comes in. They bag the thing up. The stench was horrible. They said it was like rotted corpses, what it smelled like. So the question is, how old is that thing? And we don't know. We don't know. I was threatened by a guy from the deep state because of our work on the Kandahar giant. I was threatened 3 different times. He said, when they come to arrest you, LA, they'll find kiddie porn on your phone. They can mess with your car, so you'll have an automobile accident. One of your children will go missing and never be found again. That's how I was threatened.
And who's saying this?
A guy from a deep state.
So like calling you on the phone or in person,
No,
or
no,
how does
this was
this?
in person? This was mano a mano in a hotel lobby in Dallas, and I had a bodyguard with me.
That's terrifying, LA. That's
Very
awful.
It's the only time it's ever happened. Although we had an incident with the car. I was in what I call the go-kart, which at that time, this is circa 2013, 14, 15, somewhere in that window. Peggy, my wife, would know the dates. But I had a 1991 SL 500, which I restored. It's the go-kart. It's just a fun. I live up in the Santa Monica Mountains, very circuitous roads up here. And it's just a blast to drive that car. I'm coming around a corner. All of a sudden, I hear boom. I lose control of the car. The steering isn't working. I jam on the brakes and grip the wheel and turn it like this and come to a skid. I can take you to the exact spot. I call the tow truck. The tow truck comes and I open the hood. I look at the timing belt. The timing belt's broken. So I hold the timing belt up to the driver of the tow truck and I say, what does this look like to you? And he kind of looks at it and he goes, do you have any enemies? I just went, that's all.
Whoa. So do you think there was an attempt on your life?
Absolutely.
That's scary stuff, man. That's scary stuff.
Well, the guy, remember the kid recently, like last year, who had that photograph of the giant on top of the hill? I think it was in Mexico or
Yeah,
wherever.
sure.
And he passed away.
Did he really?
Dead.
Wow. Well, what do you know what the circumstances of his
I
death were?
don't know.
Hmm.
All I know is when he's giving a disclaimer, he keeps looking like this to the side, as if, am I doing okay type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you said there were two incidences in Kandahar. Am I understanding that right?
Well, there was one, our giant was in Kandahar. Steve Quayle's giant was lifted, I believe, out of Iraq during that conflict by a helicopter pilot. Since then, I have had other witnesses that have come on the record, which I can't. Well, actually, they haven't come on the record. They've told me privately about the giant. We had the grandson of the witch come on the program, who, although he was, never met his grandmother because she passed away, his father told him all these stories. His grandmother was a witch, and she would bring the offerings to the giant in the cave. Same cave in the Kandahar. So the question is, what are we looking at? These are Nephilim. And the question is, if a Nephilim cannot be killed except by decapitation, how old is that thing? Could it be thousands of years old? The answer to, in my opinion, is yes, it could be. It could be thousands of years old.
Now, are the Nephilim, are there good Nephilim and bad Nephilim? How do you know? No, they're all bad, I guess.
Yeah, because they're the progeny of fallen angels and human women creating a hybrid known as the Nephilim. It's the seed war.
And they're part of this army of the dragon.
Yeah, absolutely. It all Genesis. If you get in your head and in your spirit, man, the idea that Genesis 3:15 is the truth, and you start going out from there, it's like dominoes. Everything goes click, 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 click. Everything just falls right in place. And if you don't, and many of our churches don't, then, Sodom and Gomorrah, what's that? What's the flood of Noah? Why does the mandate from the God of the Old Testament tell the Israelites to kill every man, woman, children, and all the animals and burn everything? That's genocide. We both know it's genocide. And I can sit here with a pastor or whoever who doesn't know about Genesis 3:15 and doesn't understand the seed war, and he'll try to tap dance around that and say, well, God's ways are beyond our ways. Nonsense. It's genocide. Unless we are looking at soulless hybrid beings who were never supposed to be here. And that's the seed war. And they were here in the Americas.
So you don't see the giants as necessarily normal biological creatures where there's a population of these beings that are simply being, like us. You see them as more as supernatural.
Yeah, here's the reason why all this has been scrubbed from the record. This is the picture I found. It's in the book, shameless plug, On the Trail of a Nephilim, which, by the way, makes a great paperweight. That's the picture of Ralph Glidden. Standing in front of him in situ is a 9-foot skeleton. I discovered the photograph in Catalina. It's my research. I was out there. I discovered the photograph. So we had 3 different people analyze the photograph. It's a 9-footer. So what's that doing out on Catalina Island? And when we went back to Catalina Island, I'll show you that in just a second. So we go back to Catalina Island, and this is what we see. Where is it?
It's hard for me to read that, but I can see the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. See the picture? What's
Yeah.
missing? What's missing from the picture?
Did they cut out the giant?
Yeah. This is in the Catalina. This is my late business partner. He passed away 5 years today.
Yeah, it's a little blurry. It's a little blurry. Did they cut out the giant? I can't tell for sure.
Yeah, they cut out the giant.
How can you cut out the giant? What's the point without the giant?
That's there it is. They cut out the giant. See
They
that?
cut out the giant. Why did they cut out the giant?
Why do you think, Jack?
Did they get cornered by some guy in a parking garage?
Why do you think they would do that? What does it point back to? What does it point back to the veracity and the validity of what? The biblical prophetic narrative.
So to break it down, there's a giant in Catalina Island. There's giants in the Middle East. We know there were giants all over North America.
Absolutely.
So these are beings with a global presence. Their existence is certainly being covered up by the establishment.
Yeah.
And you see them as part of the Nephilim.
They are the Nephilim.
They are the Nephilim.
They are the Nephilim. In fact, Native Americans that I've talked to will say that, the star gods came down and had intercourse with the women, and here they were, cannibalistic, six-fingered, red-haired giants with double rows of teeth. They were everywhere. They were all through the Americas.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of like a positive example of a giant, like a somewhat corroborated story. I'm having trouble offhand. Yeah, I want to say there's like good giants, but I have to do some research on the good
And that's the
giants.
deal. I mean, and I get it. People who, unless you understand Genesis 3:15, we as human beings, well, there's got to be some good out of it somewhere. When I was in Carnac, France, speaking and interviewing Mr. Carnac France himself, I mean, this guy has like been there for 35 years. He kept trying to say, well, there's got to be some good out of this thing. I said, no, there doesn't. You just want it to be that way because it fits your paradigm. But when we come to grips with the fact that there's a war going on here in an unseen dimension that will eventually spill over to Earth, everything changes. The Karnak, France is Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. The mounds that we see all throughout the Americas, fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. Sacsayhuaman, Teotihuacan, Gilgal Raphaim, Menga in Spain, all the domes that we see all throughout Israel and Portugal and other places, Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. Sacsayhuaman in Peru, same thing. Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. That's what we're looking at. They were here. They set up shop. They were worshipped as gods. They were worshipped as gods. Egypt, think about this. People are always going, well, the Sumerian tablets predate the biblical narrative. So what? What does that mean? That's just a straw man argument. I don't care if they're 10,000 years, like Göbekli Tepe. Why was Göbekli Tepe covered over? Why was Stonehenge in the Americas covered over? Why is Cahokia abandoned? Why are all these sites like Corral in Peru, the oldest city in the Americas, 5,000 years old? Why is that site abandoned? And now you get, due to climate change, all these people left. Nonsense. You guys are just making this stuff up. You don't even know who built it or what these people call themselves. You make up words and names like the Hopewell. That Hopewell was a farmer. You don't even know who did this. And we discovered something which we'll reveal probably this year. It's in our films. That is unprecedented. No one in the history of this planet has ever linked this together. We discovered it. And it's in one of our films. And we had a whole bunch of people look at this and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. What we're looking at is spherical trigonometry happening thousands of years ago. No one had spherical trigonometry thousands of years ago. And in order to actually work in spherical trigonometry on the globe, you've got to know the circumference of the earth, and you have to be above the earth like we are in modernity. Who is the prince of the power of the air? The dragon. Everything hails back to the seed war. Genesis 3:15 is the gateway to the biblical narrative. Understand that, the book unfolds. Don't understand that, good luck.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, LA. I really appreciate it. That was fascinating. I didn't even get a chance to ask you about the elongated skull people. I see the skull in the background. I think those are such fascinating stuff. But maybe next time, can you let people know where to find you and remind people when your book is coming out and what the tentative title is called?
So we have 30 films. Here's some of our recent ones right here. You can go on streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net. You can download Roswell for $4.99, less than a cup of coffee. So I'm not getting rich off of this. We're just trying to get the word out to people. And by the way, here, this is the cover. You have to have me back. See that?
Evidence from the debris field.
And guess what that is in his palm of his hand?
I'm squinting. What is it?
That's a piece of metal that we discovered in the debris field, buried 6 to 8 inches below the surface. They didn't get it all, Jack. They didn't get it all.
What? There's still pieces left of the Roswell craft?
Last year, we found 2 pieces. We had the metal tested. The closest thing is an aluminum alloy 7000 series, but it doesn't match. And the aluminum alloy series 7000 wasn't invented, I think, until 1951 or 1952. Roswell happened in 47.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we do. We're actually in the field, doing the work. So
I love it. That is so important to have people like you out there knocking on doors and going through the debris fields and finding finding gold. I think that's so important, and I really appreciate what you do.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. We'll have to do it again.
All right. Thank you so much. And everybody give LA a big shout out and a big thank you in the comment section before. Like and thumbs up and all that kind of good stuff. And definitely look for his book coming out in the fall.
Thank you. Appreciate it.